Hi everybody, my name is Hannah Gelbard. I use they, them, themself pronouns. I'm going to talk a little bit about Adams Morgan, my neighborhood and community. It's a historic part of Northwest Washington, D.C. There are going to be a lot of pictures that I took in this presentation. This is a picture of the Laogai Museum, and this is T Street and 18th. 18th Street is the main corridor of Adams Morgan. Just a real quick map of Washington, D.C. I'll have some more maps later on, but just so you guys can see where Adams Morgan is, hopefully you can see my cursor. So there are 4 quadrants to Washington, D.C. There's the southwest that doesn't have a whole lot of housing, not a ton of people live in the southwest. Then there's the southeast here, the northeast. Those are historically more African American parts of the city. And then the northwest, where I live, that frankly tends to be richer and whiter, at least a lot of areas. And then Adams Morgan is kind of right over here on the line between the east side and the west side. Okay, and here's another couple of pictures just so you guys can get a sense of what it looks like. This stretch of 18th Street here, there's an elementary school, there's a little park. DC is really famous for pizza and kebab places that are open late, these jumbo slices of pizza. So that's something you're looking at here, and a happy hour menu. And then this is one of the wealthier streets in the neighborhood with houses for sale. Okay, to get into demographics a little bit. So this was surprising for me. My neighborhood is whiter than I thought it was, and it's definitely gotten whiter and more gentrified just in the last 10 years or 15 years especially. So you can see if we look over at the race in 2019, the Adams Morgan neighborhood has 67.1% white, 8.7% black, and then 10.7% Hispanic, 6% Asian, and a smattering of other races. So pretty predominantly white, especially by comparison to a lot of the rest of the city. Northeast and southeast DC are closer to 50% or higher black slash African American slash African. And then here when you see the distribution of residents' ages in Adams Morgan, so this was interesting to me that we're pretty young in our late 20s, 30s, early 30s, and that's true especially of women in the neighborhood. Apparently we tend to have a lot of women in our 20s and 30s, and then the population of men is a little bit older. We still have substantial numbers of people in their 40s, and then it really starts to go down. People in their 50s and 60s really tend to move out of downtown DC and move either out to the outskirts of the city where things tend to be a little bit more settled, or even more commonly they move to Virginia or Maryland outside of Washington DC. It's a little bit more of a quiet and settled life. Where I live is not very quiet, I will admit. And then a little bit on demographic descriptions of education. So the most recent stuff I could find was from 2019, obviously, but we're a pretty highly educated neighborhood. We have a lot of people with bachelor's degrees, close to probably 25%, and then master's degrees also. So by comparison to all of DC, we have slightly more folks in Adams Morgan that have master's degrees, around the same with higher degrees than that, and many fewer people with high school or an equivalent degree than the rest of Washington does. Adams Morgan doesn't have a ton of kids living in it. One of the main points here. Okay, important institutions in my neighborhood. This is a picture of the interior of Potter's House. Potter's House is a restaurant and a coffee shop and a historic community meeting place. During the civil rights movement, when a lot of other institutions closed, Potter's House stayed open and was a was a meeting place. So it has remained kind of a radical place. You can go there and buy a meal for someone else. There's kind of a pay it forward program. And so they've really remained, I think they have Christian roots, and they've really maintained that kind of solidarity with other folks in the community, even as Adams Morgan has gotten more gentrified. Potter's House has still really stood up for the common man, as it were, since the 1960s. Mama Aisha's is a resident. I apologize for that. My picture is not very clear there. This is the Mama Aisha's presidential mural. That's Mama Aisha in the middle of the picture. And just to kind of emphasize that this is still a DC neighborhood, and there's still a lot of, there's a lot of politics. And to kind of point out the spirit of the community, Mama Aisha's has not painted our most recent president. I imagine she probably will put Joe Biden on there, but I think she's leaving out the other guy. Okay, there are a bunch of embassies in Adams Morgan as well on 16th Street. This is the Cuban embassy here. This is the Cuban flag here in front. This is the Lithuanian embassy from 1918. We also have the Polish embassy, the embassy of the Central African Republic, and Gabon. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So like I said, still a DC area, still very heavily political in some ways. Some other important institutions: the Marie Reed Rec Center, which is also an elementary school and my polling place, and a health clinic. It was revitalized in 2013, and it's a big center for people to play soccer and swim, just really a kind of a community development place and a meeting place. To give maps a little bit more, Adams Morgan is this stretch of 18th Street here and Columbia here, and then some of 16th Street and these side streets, Champlain and Columbia. So the main nexus of Adams Morgan is right here, this 18th Street and Adams Mill and Columbia Road. And then just to give a quick historic map from 1888, a few decades later, Adams Morgan would be named Adams Morgan because of the integration of the all-white John Quincy Adams School and the all-black Thomas Morgan School. So that's why it's called Adams Morgan, because of integration. Okay, just to speed along with some elements of good community from the article that we read: commonality of values and goals, homogeneity, opportunities, relationships that bind people. Adams Morgan, I would argue, does have some commonality of values. We're not that homogenous. We're reasonably diverse. There are definitely a number of opportunities here in the city and in Adams Morgan. And there are some relationships that bind people. We tend to be pretty politically liberal on the whole. So, are we a good community in Adams Morgan? Well, we're pretty safe. There's definitely crime here, but it's fairly low compared to some of the rest of the city. We definitely have good water. Our air is pretty clean. I mean, it's still the city, but it's pretty clean. We have pretty readily accessible goods and services. We need more inexpensive grocery stores here, but we do have one pretty good Harris Teeter. Building interrelationships here. So we have a couple of historic churches. There's Jewish community that I'm part of, like the New Synagogue Project. Our neighborhood commissions are pretty active, and sports, like I mentioned, at Marie Reed, and there are a lot of mutual aid groups that are pretty active here. I put this picture that says masks required to just emphasize that there is some commonality of values. Adams Morgan was pretty careful about stuff like masking, pretty careful about COVID. We have pretty liberal values here. This is a quick video of just birds flitting around, and one of my neighbors' bird feeders, but we don't have to worry about that too much. Oh no, don't tell me my computer is, oh no. I still recording here? Okay, something got mixed up there, but I think I'm still recording. Okay, my video didn't work, but that was just gonna be some birds to emphasize that life is fairly peaceful here. Changes I would make to Adams Morgan: I would ensure that gentrification is coming with the consent of longtime residents and not just with developers. And we need more housing. That's a general DC thing. We need more housing in Adams Morgan, and we need more housing in DC. Thanks very much, guys.